Hey guys, several weeks ago, the company iVANKY, I'm not sure how they pronounce that, but they kindly sent me out their FusionDock Pro 1 Plus hub. This is a triple monitor solution for Apple MacBook users, but it can be used with other Apple Macs which use Apple Silicon. And I've been using it with my Apple Mac Mini, and it's actually connected to my Apple Mac Mini right now, and it works really well. So what I'd like to do in this video is talk about this hub and talk about what it can do, and hopefully that will help you see whether this is something that could maybe fit into your setup. So what this primarily does is navigate around a problem that many Apple MacBook users have, which is that you're kind of limited with how many monitors that you can connect to your MacBook or to your Mac, which makes it very difficult to have a multiple monitor setup. Now, going back to the M1, I think you could connect one monitor. It's got a little bit better over the years, and it does depend whether you've got the Pro version of the chip or the Max version, etc. And you can see on pages like this that you can connect one display over Thunderbolt, two displays if you lower the resolution in the hertz, etc. It did get a little bit better with the M2 and the M3 chip, etc. But most of the chips, certainly the M1 and M2, they're all limited in some way. And the ones that aren't limited, well, you're using up your Thunderbolt connections, multiple Thunderbolt connections to connect all of those monitors. And that's where something like this comes in. And it's a really interesting solution because it allows you to connect 3 monitors, HDMI 2.0, 4K at 60 Hz. It can deliver up to 100 watts to your MacBook. So you connect, you can see this here in the background, but you can see this has got a power connection here, and then this connection here would deliver 100 watts to your MacBook. And the front port here has got 20 watts power delivery charge as well. I'll talk about the port selection later, and I'll delve deeper into that, but there's 14 ports, and there's a lot of interesting ports there, so it's quite useful that you've got all these additional ports. Now, as far as how it does this, well, it kind of navigates it around using a driver solution. But before I get to that, let's talk about price. So yes, the company sent this out to me in order to review it, but it doesn't influence what I think or what I say to you guys. But it does retail at around 300 bucks, 300 euros, 300 pounds, $300. You can see it's 300 pounds here in the UK. But bizarrely, their discount right now is $100 off. So they've got the price in pounds and the discount in dollars. And if you add it to cart and take my face away, you can see that that works out to about £219, $218.84. So I would say for about 220 bucks, there's normally a discount running at some point, you can get this dock. Now, it's important to know that the company sell a number of other docks. You've got the larger Max 1 dock. There's the older Pro 1 dock, which is the closest to this new one, but the speeds aren't as good. And so don't be confused about that. And then you've got the Fusion docks as well. Now, all of these other docks are available on Amazon. And I'm positive that the FusionDock Pro 1 Plus will be available on Amazon stores in the future, but this has just came out, and at the moment it's not on Amazon. You'd have to go through their official website. As I say this right now, as I record, it's only on their official website, but in a few months' time, I suspect it will be on Amazon as well. Now, if we jump back to their website, the sales page obviously has a lot of information about what this is for, how it can help you. You can see some example setups. You're using this hub to connect 3 different monitors. One thing I will say is that there's a lot of misinformation on this page. Like you saw there, it said 150 watts, but the power adapter is actually 180 watts. So the key points are at the top here: triple 4K display, 14 ports, 10 gigabits per second transfer rate across those 14 ports. You've got 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and 100 watt laptop charging. Now, one of the key things here is this DisplayLink technology, because what they've done to navigate around the problem which MacBooks have is that the first HDMI connection is a hardware connection. That's HDMI 2.0 up to 4K at 60 Hz. Now, if you don't install any software, that's all you can connect. You can connect one monitor via the first HDMI port. But if you download the DisplayLink Manager software, which is free to download, then when you connect to HDMI to 2 and 3, second and third HDMI ports, then you can now use all HDMI ports. And that's how you get around the problem. And DisplayLink is, if I jump to the browser here, I'll show you. It's available for Mac OS, for Windows, for Chrome OS, for Linux, for Android. It is 100% free to download and use. And there's actually a good explanation here if you indulge me to explain. It says that DisplayLink software is more than just a graphics driver. It functions as a virtual graphics card that works seamlessly with the operating system, overcoming the limitations of the host platform and enabling the connection of multiple displays. By installing DisplayLink, users can extend their screen real estate without the need for additional physical graphics cards, allowing for enhanced productivity and multitasking. Now, that's a kind of generalized explanation of it because they do different solutions for PCs and different things as well. But that's essentially what's going on here. We've got a virtual graphics card that's allowing us to navigate around the problem. Now, when you download that driver, it's free of charge. You install it on your Mac, and then it's just an app that runs all the time. And you can disable it if you want. You can just shut down that software, and HDMI 2 and 3 will shut down. And you can go in and you can, some different options. You can see launch automatically after login, power save options. You can disable certain displays. You can change the rotation of them, etc. Not the most options out there in the world, but you do have some control over the second and third monitors. And I've been using it and it works extremely well. Now, it's just important to be aware of that's how this works, that you have that software side of it and it's from a third-party company. You have to be aware of that before you spend any money on this hub. But my own experience of it so far is that it works really well. Now, I've got it plugged in just now. I'm going to take that off just now because it's kind of limiting what I can do here. So you can see I've got 3 HDMI ports here, and I've got the USB connection going to my Mac Mini. But what I'm going to do is just take these off just now, just to illustrate what's going on. And if we're getting focus here, there we go. So we've got 3 HDMI ports. Now, with the 1, 2, 3 here, HDMI 1, if you connect an HDMI cable to the first one, it will, you'll extend your display from your MacBook or from your Mac Mini or whatever you're using, and you'll connect to the monitor. Works great. For these two to work, you have to have DisplayLink Manager downloaded, installed, and running. And then you can use these 2 ports here. That is an important thing to understand about this whole setup. This is essentially being delivered via hardware. This is via DisplayLink Manager. In practice, though, once it's all running, you don't even know. You don't know which one's connected to which. You don't know which one's the hardware connection, which one is the virtual connection. You don't know. You just have 3 4K up to 60 hertz displays. It's worth noting, though, I've not connected a 4K display in my tests. I have connected 3 different monitors, one of which is an ultra-wide, and it all worked great. And you just don't even know which one is the hardware connection, which one is the virtual connection. But it is important to know that is how they do it. They use that DisplayLink Manager technology, that software. It's free to download, and in my experience so far, the software runs great. But without further ado, let's talk about what's in the box, and then we'll look at the port selection. When you open up the box for the FusionDock Pro 1 Plus, you will find a quick manual and a more in-depth user manual. The accessories box includes a 1 meter long Type-C to Type-C cable for connecting your Apple Mac, together with a 180 watt power adapter and AC power cord. Finally, we have the FusionDock Pro 1 Plus hub itself, which has a nice aluminium alloy finish and weighs 342 grams or 12.1 ounces. Let's take a closer look at the FusionDock Pro 1 Plus and talk about its port selection, because yes, this is a way to connect 3 monitors, but it's also a hub. It's a dock. It's a way to connect USB devices for transferring files via USB, via the SD card slot, etc. So it's important to talk about that as well. Now, as far as size goes, the length is 185 millimeters, the width is 79 millimeters, and height is 24 millimeters. And if you look at it, it's quite a sleek little hub. I mean, this will fit behind monitors, it will fit underneath monitors. It's quite a sleek little hub, and I think it looks good. It's got this nice aluminium alloy. I like the brushed metal finish. I think this would look good on any desktop if that's important to you. I personally don't care too much when it comes to docks and things. I prefer, them to be practical to work, but I do think that this looks good. Now, as far as connections go, what I would say in general for docks and for hubs, yes, this sounds, it's like dad advice. It sounds very boring, but I do encourage you to download the manual and to have a look through it to see what all these ports can do. I think this is extra important for hubs and docks because you're buying these things in order to, connect things up, to have your perfect setup. There's no point spending $200-300 on a dock and then finding that it doesn't have that port that you need, or that you use 2 ports and the other port then has limited speeds. Make sure you do your research, make sure you pick up the dock that works for you. And the best way to do that is to download the manual first. Now, that is especially true for this hub because one of the reasons that I've had this for 6 weeks and not got the review out sooner is because of the company. When they sent this out, it was very new and they were still using older marketing material for the older Pro 1 dock, not the Plus. So the images were wrong, the specs were wrong, the information was wrong, and they've updated it now. You can see they've got the new version now with the new image, but the image still says UHS 1 for the SD card slot, despite the fact that it is a UHS 2 card slot. It's annoying from my point of view, from a reviewer's point of view. It is frustrating when you're working with companies and they're still putting wrong information on the website. I have told them about it. They do seem to be updating it now, but just be aware of that. And again, just download the manual. It seems to be the absolute truth here as far as what's going on. Okay, I'll refer back to the manual, but let's take a closer look here to see what's going on. On one side here, we have the good old-fashioned Kensington lock. Always good to stop someone stealing your stuff. And at the other side, we've got the main Type-C to Type-C connection. This is what's known as an upstream port. And this will deliver up to 100 watts of power. So in the next section, I'll talk about that in more detail because there's a few things I want to talk about with that. But that is the main connection to your computer. Now, if we go back here, as we pointed out earlier, and as you'll see in the manual, the first HDMI port is hardware, HDMI 2.0, 4K at 60 Hz. Though the second and third HDMI port, it's the same resolution, the same refresh rate, but those are driver-based. So that's your hardware connection. Those are the driver-based connection. We've then got 2 USB Type-A 10 gigabit per second connections, and then we've got 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and then we've got the barrel connection for DC in. So that will go there, like that. That's for your 180 watt charger, DC in 20 volts. So that's power at the back. So this is essentially the back of the hub, and this will be the front. Well, generally speaking. At the left-hand side here, we've got 2 Type-C connections. And if we go back to the manual, if I get the right area, you'll see that, yes, that part on the side there, that's the 100 watt upstream port. But then we've got 2 ports, and it's a little bit misleading, I think, because one says PD, power delivery, and that almost suggests that it can't deliver data. And then you've got USB 10 gigabits per second. But if you look at the manual, it does say that both of these ports are 10 gigabits per second, and both of them are for data transfer and for power charging. But the first one can deliver 20 watts of power for your phone, for your tablet, and the second one is 7.5 watts. Just a little bit misleading the way they've labeled it, in my opinion. That's 20 watts, that's 7.5. They're both 10 gigabits per second, but that's the way they've labeled it. We've got 2 additional USB Type-A ports, 10 gigabits per second, and then we've got the SD card slots. And once again, I'll go back to the manual to talk about this, because it says that the front card slot has a transmission speed of up to 312 megabytes per second. It's compatible with SDXC, SDHC, standard STTF cards. Make sure the direction is correct, of course. So you've got your SD card slot and you've got your micro SD card slot there and there. Very easy to use. And then finally, we have the 3.5mm audio interface here. And then we have the power button, which lights up when it's connected. So those are all the ports. And again, I'll reiterate it. Check the manual. Just go over some of the things there, just to, if you're unsure about some things. It's got some information there about the displays, 4K at 60. We've got all the dimensions there. We've got information about the power, etc. as well. But what I want to do now is talk about this upstream connection. As someone who loves tech, as a tech YouTuber who loves technology, who uses technology, I'm always trying to get the right information so that I can pass it on to everyone else in my videos. I need to know what I'm talking about so that what I say in my videos is correct. Because if it's wrong, I'm going to get 1,000 comments from people telling me that I'm wrong. I do my best. Sometimes, I misquote. Sometimes I might draw the wrong conclusion from my testing, but I'm always trying to do the right thing. But this Type-C port has been frustrating because I've not had any real clarification as to what that connection is. And I think that is important. I think you need to know what that connection speed is, what the standard is, before you spend money on a dock. And it's frustrating because if you look at the manual, it just says USB-C upstream port. Doesn't say USB 3.2 Gen 2, it doesn't say Thunderbolt, it doesn't say USB 4. On their website, they've got the fact that the warranty is 24 months, it's Mac OS 11.5 or later. We've got all the power delivery specifications, and each of these ports, 10 gigabits per second, 10 gigabits per second, 2.5 gigabit. But again, the main connection, incredibly vague, upstream, USB-C. It doesn't tell us what's actually going on. So I made it a point of trying to clarify that before I did the video, which is why this video took a little bit longer to get out. So they repeatedly told me that that was a 10 gigabit per second connection, 10 gigabits per second, which doesn't make any sense because in addition to all of these ports having a maximum of 10 gigabits per second, obviously less if you're connecting multiple devices. In addition to all of those, you have the HDMI connection because this is a monitor hub. Now, these are obviously driver-based, but this is HDMI 2.0, 4K, it's hardware, and that requires up to 18 gigabits per second. So they kept telling me that, no, it's only 10 gigabits per second, and I pointed out, well, it cannot be 10 because that is 18, and that has to be 18. So that cannot be 18 whilst that is 10. It doesn't work. And then they come back to me and said, oh, okay, yeah, it is 18. It's 18. I'm like, well, that still doesn't make sense because if that's 18 and that's 18, then there's no bandwidth available for the rest of the ports on the hub. It doesn't make sense. So is it Thunderbolt? Is it USB 4? I just like to pass on the right information. Now, one of the reasons I'm getting, I had this back and forth is they were very nice, but I was speaking with the social media marketing influencer type team. And rather than go to the technical team and come back with the correct information, they kept just telling me, no, it's this. No, it's that. So they kept telling me multiple emails, it's 10 gigabits per second, and then they told me 18. Eventually, I did get feedback from the product team after a lot of pushing, and they said, when it comes to the docking station specifications, we typically measure the bandwidth based on the USB interface. The 18 gigabits per second refers specifically to the video interface bandwidth, which is what I told them. You can think of the USB-C port on the laptop as the video output source, where half of the channels are dedicated to transmitting USB data and the other half to transmitting video. In the case of the docking station, the 10 gigabits per second bandwidth is used for USB signals, while the 18 gigabits per second is allocated for HDMI video transmission. They're kind of repeating what I said to them at that point. Obviously, what I've said has been passed on to them. But then they've kind of said that it's 18 and 10. So that's 28. 28 is not a standard. I don't believe 30 is for any recent USB connections either. It's going to be 20 or 40. They didn't confirm that. I asked them to confirm, so is it Thunderbolt, is it USB? They did come back and say, to clarify, laptops with USB 3.0, USB 3.2, USB 4 Thunderbolt ports should be able to output to HDMI in 2 and 3 without issue. However, HDMI 1 requires a laptop with either a USB 4 or Thunderbolt port for proper display output. This is due to the functionality of the docking station and the performance limitations of the laptop itself. Finally, we have not a concrete answer, but essentially we have. What they're saying is you need a USB 4, Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 5 connection, 40 gigabits per second, in order for all of this to function correctly. If not, then HDMI will not HDMI 1 will not work. Now, this is something, when I was going back and forth, I was doing my own testing, and that is something I saw myself. When I connected the main upstream here to my 10 gigabits per second connection on my Mac Mini, then the interesting thing was that HDMI 2 and 3 worked, which makes sense because it's going through the driver, it's going through the software. So when I connected it via a 10 gigabits per second connection, all of the data ports worked, HDMI 2 and 3 worked, but HDMI 1 did not. Now, I think that's important to note. Ideally, what you want to do is connect this to a Thunderbolt 3 or 4 port or 5 port, or to a USB 4 port to get that 40 gigabits per second so that you can connect all 3 monitors and you've got access to all of the ports. But if you only have a 10 gigabits per second connection or a 20 gigabits per second connection, you can use this hub in a limited way. And by that, I mean that you can connect your HDMI cables here, connect your monitors here. Those 2 monitors will extend your display. You can use them. You cannot use the first one, but you can use these 2 with the lower transfer rate. So just something to bear in mind, you ideally want to use USB 4, Thunderbolt 3, 4, or 5. But if you only have access at a pinch to a port which is 10 gigabits per second or 20, you can still use this, but you're just going to be limited in that first HDMI hardware connection will not work. Took me a long time to get there, but I hope that clarifies what's going on with that upstream USB Type-C connection. Okay, let's talk about testing. As I pointed out earlier on, I've had this hub for 7 weeks. I've used it in a lot of different scenarios, and I've performed a lot of tests to get a better idea of what this can do, what it's all about. I think the most important tests that I performed were testing that this is a triple monitor solution. And it is. It works really, really well as well. So it does get a little bit hot when everything's connected, but it works incredibly well. I tested this with the 2 monitors here and my gaming monitor in the back, which is effectively the monitor for my Xbox. I had all 3 monitors connected up to my wife's MacBook Pro, which has an M1 chip, and I also did it with my Apple Mac Mini with an M4 chip. So MacBook and Mac Mini, or MacBook Pro and Mac Mini, and M1 and M4. And in both situations, it worked incredibly well. And with the MacBook, I essentially had 4 displays because I still had the laptop display. So with that MacBook Pro, I had the laptop display and then 3 monitors displaying. It's incredible how much real estate that I had coming from a laptop. And it just kind of surprises you because you've got the 3 HDMI here, but 2 of them are virtual via DisplayLink Manager. But you wouldn't know. It works exactly the same way. It's quick. I didn't notice any kind of refresh issues or anything like that. It's just a simple solution. You just have to download DisplayLink Manager, free to download, quick to download, install it. There's some options you can change, but the default options are probably what most people will use. Okay, I did some other tests as well. I connected the hub to the MacBook Pro and also to my Mac Mini. And with the Mac Mini via a USB 4 connection, I tested the SD card. And I just want to show you this to point out that, this is the fastest SD card I have. 277 megabytes per second read, up to 150 for write. And that's the fastest that I've got. You know, the SD card slot, they say, goes up to 312. But with that and with the USB 4 connection, with Blackmagic disk speed, I got 188.1 megabytes per second for writing, which is more than what this card should actually do. So I'm not sure how accurate that is. And 249.9 megabytes per second for reading. Now with Apple Disk Benchmark, which I personally think is a little bit more accurate, I got 150.62 for writing, 267.9 megabytes per second reading. I think that's very good. I also connected the Sabrent 10 gigabit per second enclosure that I've got. With Blackmagic, I got 975.5 megabytes per second writing, 857.2 megabytes per second reading. And with Apple Disk Benchmark, it was 1.01 gigabytes per second writing, 920.68 megabytes per second reading. Unfortunately, my NAS is in the garage. That's where I store it just now. So I couldn't do a 2.5 gigabit data transfer test to test that. Unfortunately, I should have tried to work out something like that. I just didn't have the time to mess everything up to get that set up. But what I did do was just check the internet connection, which I think for most people is probably more practical. But you do have a 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet connection here for data transfers and for speed. But just from an internet speed point of view, which I've got like 900 to 1 gigabit per second. My Mac Mini Wi-Fi 6C, I get 406.83 download, 448.72 upload. And with Mac Mini with the Ethernet, I get 931.19 download, 933.62 upload. So the Wi-Fi connection on the Mac Mini is okay, but the Ethernet connection is very good, in my opinion. Over 900 megabits per second download and upload, very respectable. And then when I switched the Ethernet connection to the hub here, the 2.5 gigabit per second connection here, I got a still respectable 798.21 megabits per second download, 896.02 megabits per second upload. So I wasn't pushing it to its full potential, 2.5 there for transferring files, but I was quite impressed with it, that the fact that I was connected to 3 monitors and I was still getting those speeds. So that was quite good. And that's something you have to be aware of, that, you know, when you've connected all the monitors, when you're connecting the USB devices and the SD card, etc., you are sharing 10 gigabits per second across all of these ports, despite the fact that 10 seems to be the maximum for most of these ports. You are sharing it. So if you're transferring files from multiple devices, you are going to see those speeds reduce. Now, I did perform the exact same tests with the 10 gigabit per second connection on the Mac Mini, at the front of the Mac Mini. And as I noted earlier, the main thing is that HDMI 1 stopped working. I still had connections to the other monitors, HDMI 2 and 3, and I then performed all the same tests. I connected the SD card, I connected the USB enclosure, and I performed the internet speed test as well. And with all of them, there was maybe a little bit, slower speeds on occasion. Some of the speeds were actually slightly higher. But overall, the speeds were not affected that much. It might be a different story when you connect multiple devices, but if you are connecting this to a slower USB Type-C port, you're still going to get healthy speeds through all of these ports here. So that's good to see. I was surprised by that the speed test did not perform too badly when you were going through that slower connection. So across the board, I was quite impressed with the speeds. But again, the key thing to note is that you are going to greatly reduce speeds when you connect a lot of different devices to the hub. I hope you've all enjoyed this look at the iVANKY FusionDock Pro 1 Plus, and I hope you've got a better understanding as to what this dock is all about. Hopefully you've got a better understanding as to whether this is for you or whether it's not for you. If you've watched this whole video, you'll know that there's been a few things that I've kind of, I guess I've been nitpicking at, but that's my job. I need to try and demonstrate, the limitations of devices like this and point out things that you have to be aware of before you spend a few $100 on this. I will say though, as a triple monitor solution, I think this is excellent. I really do think it's excellent. It works great with the MacBook. It worked really well with the Mac Mini as well, perfectly. Very easy to set up. You are using, one connection is hardware, the other two are virtual, but you just wouldn't realize that that is what's going on under the hood. It works really well. So it's a great way to expand the real estate, the monitor resolution that you have access to. If you have a MacBook, you not only have your laptop display, you have an additional 3 displays. And if you've got something like a Mac Mini, you've got 3 displays going through that and potentially more going through the USB 4 ports as well. You could have 4 or 5 monitors connected. It's kind of crazy how many monitors you could gain access to depending on the MacBook or the Mac that you've got. So in that regard, I think this is an excellent solution. In my own setup, I did have it connected to the USB 4 connection mostly. And that's a great way to use it. Just connect it to your Thunderbolt or to your USB 4 connection. And that's, you've got your multiple monitor setup and you've got your dock there as well. But what's quite interesting about it is, as I pointed out, after a lengthy back and forth with the company, you can connect this to slower connections that have 10 or 20 gigabits per second, and it still works well. So in my situation, if I'm connecting a lot of drives or a lot of USB 4 docks to my Mac Mini, I could connect this to the USB 10 gigabit per second connection at the front of the Mac Mini, and I'll still get 3 monitors. And I can still connect another monitor to the back of the Mac Mini as well. It just opens up so many different options for connecting different displays. And it really does make your MacBook or your Apple Mac Mini or Apple Mac, it makes it a lot more powerful. So I've been quite impressed about the triple monitor side of things. Of course, this is marketed as a dock as well. And the way that I view this and the way that I would sell it to you as is, this is a triple monitor solution, and that is the main reason to buy this. If you're looking for a dock, if you're looking, for SD card connections, USB drive connections, etc., you're probably better buying a USB 4 or a Thunderbolt 3, 4, or 5 dock. You are, because you're going to get higher speeds for data transfers. So that would be the better option. If you're looking to connect a lot of devices, webcams and different things, you would look elsewhere, because this is limiting you to 10 gigabits per second across all of it. Yes, the 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet's nice, all those ports are nice, and you've got power delivery as well. But if you're buying this as a dock to connect lots of devices, I think you'll be disappointed, because you have to share that 10 gigabits per second across all of the different ports. Now, in some situations, that is not a problem. For example, if you put in your SD card, you're just copying your files, you take your SD card back out. If you put in a USB drive, you're not constantly transferring files most of the time anyway. So for a lot of people, that won't be an issue anyway, but it's just something to be aware of. If the main thing you're looking for is to connect lots of devices and transfer a lot of files, you're better off with a Thunderbolt dock or a USB 4 dock. You're going to get faster, transfer speeds. But if you're looking for a multiple monitor solution for your Apple Mac, this is excellent. And those extra ports, the Ethernet ports, the USB Type-C ports, the power delivery ports, it's just the icing on the cake. So if you are interested in this, feel free to look through the video again. If you've missed anything, check out the official website, look at the specifications, and as I pointed out earlier, read the manual as well. It's boring, I know it's boring, but it will tell you a lot about this device. It will tell you what it can do, and it will tell you what it cannot do. And that's what you should be aware of before you spend money. But I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the review. If you've got any questions, please do post them down below. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, take care.